Presented by McDonald's of Glasgow, it's time for the Brown Sports Bag. From the heart of the Barrens, a weekly local sports machine. Alongside John Butler, here's your host, James Brown.
Well, John, we're going to start off this week's show here on May 18th of the year 2020, and with something a little heavier than probably what we usually deal with, mostly because it relates to a story that came out of Laurel County. Now, that story is actually a week old, more than a week old. What happened was Laurel County School District, which encompasses for high schools, North and South Laurel schools, which have rich athletic traditions. The school district sent out, basically pink slipped all the coaches in the district. And then one day after they did that, 2 days after they did that, they backed off of that because they got a blowback about it. But it led you and I to have had a couple of discussions about this, not on air. And so we decided, hey, let's just address this now. The first thing I want to do is I want to lay out basically what I think my philosophy is for what the role of a school district is. A school district is a school is a part of a community, and a lot of times it's a community hub. And the primary role of it is to educate and prepare students, young people, for the future by education and opportunities. And a lot of those opportunities for some students come through athletics because they're not interested in much else. And I think coaches are basically frontline employees when it comes to connecting with students and that kind of thing. And I found it just pretty surprising that the school district decided to cut loose the coaches, that was their first, maybe one of their first thoughts. And that they backtracked on it, I thought was a good thing, but it also was a negative thing in a way because it showed that they really maybe didn't have a plan going in because they're going to have to try to figure out how to alleviate some costs. And so what was as a former coach, John, what was your reaction when you saw this?
Well, it was, I think it's the word disappointing, maybe. I was, there has been rumbles through this. If you read the article about the Laurel County, the Department of one of the lawyers that advises the Kentucky Department of Education had advised school districts that this was that they could do this. They could basically pink slip or not pay or whatever your coaches and so forth. And the problem that I had with the Laurel County deal in particular is when you get pink slipped, it's basically like getting fired from that position.
Right.
And it just, to me, it sends a bad message just in general. It's not just a bad message to the coaches that maybe your job is not that important, but it's also a bad message, I think, to a lot of the and it's also the band director, too, by the way.
Right.
It was also a bad message to a lot of the students. And what I mean by that is, in one of the things that schools want schools to do right now, teachers and coaches, is to make sure that you reach out to students, to reassure students that, things are going to be okay and so forth. And oftentimes the coach is the one person that many students are most close to, whether it's the head coach, the assistant coach, the cheerleading coach, the band director. That's the ones that they have the most personal relationships with. And I would think that would not be reassuring to a lot of student athletes in Laurel County to know that their coach may never come back.
Yeah.
And it just seemed like to me a big reach. I thought it was an overreach, an overreaction to put every coach in that district on notice that that you are pink slip. Basically, you're not going to have a job next year if things don't change. And I didn't like the message, and it is also almost a sign of a little bit of disrespect to coaches that today it's not just you're coaching baseball during baseball season or you're coaching basketball for 3 months. It is a year-round job.
Yeah, you and I have talked about this on this show before about the position that many coaches and then thereby student athletes are put in because of what the ruling the KHSA made. It's been almost a decade ago now that you could a coach could have contact with their players basically year-round except for that 2-week dead period, but they left it up to the principals at the schools to decide whether or not they were going to allow that to happen. Well, no principal is going to say no to that because they're getting pressure from parents. They're getting pressure from the coaches because they think of this as a competitive issue. And so basically coaches have been working 10 or 11 months out of the year anyway, but they haven't been getting paid for that. They're getting paid like their season is just that 3 months that they have a preseason and possible postseason and the season itself. And so we are already living in an era where basically the coaches are not getting paid for the work they are doing. It's not required work, and I do required in air quotes, but I tell you, if you're a coach and you say, hey, look, we're not going to go to all these 7-on-7s in the spring or in the summer if you're a football coach. We're going to see how long it takes for the parents to either move their kids or to pressure you out of that job.
And there's no question about that. And, the worst situation and there are a few school districts. Luckily, there's none around here that I know of. Mm-hmm. Everybody around here has not pink slipped, and everybody's getting paid and things so forth. And that's good. But there's even some school districts that I'm aware of that did not pay the stipend for the spring sports people. And what's sad about that is that those coaches that coach baseball, softball, or whatever in the spring have been also weight training with their kids year round. They've done schedules. They worked on fields. They worked on skills for the whole time too. And that's just it's tough. And I just think it's a bad call. To be perfectly honest with you, the best thing that I've read in the last few days, there was an article in I don't know if it's the Courier-Journal or the Bowling Green paper, Sunday. It was with the conference commissioner of the OVC, and I forgot the lady's name, but she is the conference commissioner of the OVC. And she was asked about cost cutting and the reactions of like a school like Akron University, who's cut their baseball team. Mm-hmm. And she just said, that this is a temporary problem that's going on right now, and that schools, whether it's colleges or high schools or whatever, this is just a temporary deal. And, we kind of maybe need to back off from making rather radical decisions on really a temporary issue. And pink slipping people that you otherwise would not pink slip for a temporary problem may not be the best cause of action. Now listen, if they tell you next year that we're not going to have any football or basketball, whatever, they tell you that beforehand, mm-hmm. then that's a totally different story. If you know beforehand that, well, we're just not going to have the sport, then you can really, then it makes a little bit more sense. Why pay somebody when they haven't done any work for that next year? That's a different story.
Mm-hmm. It does make me think about this because, as I pointed out, I think the primary directive of any school district, any public school for that matter, is, to communicate with, you've got to educate the children of your community. That's why we have public schools. You've got to educate them so that you can prepare them for what comes next. And as I said to start this, coaches are an integral part of that and always have been for as long as extracurricular. And when I say coaches, I mean no matter what it is, you manage an extracurricular activity, you have a direct line to students on a level that just your everyday teacher does not really a lot of times.
True, very true.
But I tell you who you definitely have a more direct line to the students than, it's some of these roles that are in some of these positions in central offices or in administrative positions that they manage things, but they don't teach. They don't have anything to do directly with the students. I'm not saying that the individual people aren't important. I'm saying sometimes these roles are less important, especially in a circumstance like we have now, than the role of a coach. And so if you're a school district, why put yourself in a position where you're going to alienate coaches and people who perform the extracurricular activity, mentorship and guidance? Why are you going to alienate them? There are other positions that probably you need to look at if you need to deal with the cost issues that are going to be coming up. And that's what I think the school districts really need to be doing. Now, I'm not saying some of them aren't, because they may be. That may be why they're holding off on this KDE directive that that Laurel County acted on.
Yeah, it wasn't a directive. Now it was more, I think, advice rather than a directive.
Yeah, that's right. It was. I'm sure a school district said, "Hey, do you have advice for how we can save money?" And the KDE said, "Well, here's one."
Yeah, or what do you do for sports that were canceled? Things like that. Seasons that were canceled, and oftentimes when people that are in decision that recommend, like the Department of Education, whoever the attorney was that may have recommended that, they don't know at all that just because at first blush, well, there's no softball, baseball season, so why pay those people? Well, they don't know that baseball and softball season started back in September or August in terms of the training and the workouts and the scheduling and all the things that go with that, the weight training. They may just say, well, we didn't have a season, so why not pay that person? And it just appears to me that you're going after the least common denominator sometime, and oftentimes those people are the most important to a lot of kids. And I just thought overall that that was a poor way about going about it. Mm-hmm. Now, the good thing that could happen in both high school and colleges, though, is that maybe there should be a re-looking at things. Are we spending money wisely? Are we maybe a re-looking at not just positions, but how we allocate resources and so forth? Or do sports need to be year-round? I've argued for the last 3 years in this program that there should be limitations to seasons.
Yeah. That
that actually it would free up more coaches to coach other sports and so forth. So maybe you could have that come out of this, but I wouldn't bet the farm on that.
Well, and I've said this about the college sports, and I said this about high school in a lot of ways, sports, although I think they're different animals.
Yes.
But I have said this. If parents and players want to make certain choices, or parents and their children want to make certain choices about where they go to school or what sports they play, they're free to do that. Do whatever you want to do. But I think a school district does not need to hold itself hostage to the star players or the parents who make the most noise. I don't think they need to hold themselves hostage and decide how long, that a coach should be working year-round except for that 2-month dead period. And maybe these school districts, these principals, as you just said, will look at this and say, okay, we can have 5 coaches or 7 coaches or whatever. They're going to have to coach multiple sports. They're going to be head coach in one and assistant in another, back to the old days in a lot of ways, because we don't have the money to allocate in so many of these different ways. And if the parents of some of these athletes decide they don't like the way we're going to do this and they want to go somewhere else, that's their choice. If they don't want to, they can go somewhere else. We're going to serve the students who are here.
Yes. And I think I think there could be in this whole, but again, people have to realize, I think people that are in authority, whether it's in the Department of Education or wherever, that this is, and I've said this last week, I'm convinced it's a temporary issue.
Right.
If this is not a temporary issue, if we're doing this the next 2 or 3 years, we're in a world of trouble.
Yeah, sports is the least thing we need to worry about at that point.
Yeah, that's correct. This is a temporary issue, and I don't think we need to overreact, and let's just pink slip every coach. Just doesn't seem like to me to be a well thought out reaction. And clearly it was not, because they rescinded that policy within 48 hours, and that should tell you a lot. They got a ton of blowback, and it just didn't seem very well reasoned at the time. And I'm glad around here that has not happened in any way. And I'm not saying that things couldn't be restructured if there's no season in next year, or there's a reduction in that. I'm not saying that, but just a pink slip or not pay the spring sports people at certain districts in other areas of the state, not very many, but I know a few. Mm-hmm. That doesn't seem well thought of at all.
Yeah, I mean, because basically you made a promise to them going in, and they have no control over this outcome. I mean, basically
not paying a $4,000 to a softball coach or $1,000 to an assistant softball coach. I mean, really, in the big scheme of things, is that well worth it in a school district that has a budget of $30-40 million? That doesn't make a lot of. It just doesn't make a lot of practical sense to me.
Yeah. What I'm about to say is going to sound extreme, but that would be like a coach who coaches, let's say, a football team, and they don't win a game that season, saying, you know what, you really didn't coach this year. I'm not going to keep you. We're just going to keep your money. Because basically what you're saying to them is that you didn't do the job. And in this case, they're saying you didn't do the job, but you have been doing the job. There was no season. That doesn't mean you weren't doing the job the rest of the year. That's right.
And so, hopefully hopefully that reaction that went through Laurel County, if other districts were considering it, and I haven't heard of that. Only thing I've heard is a few of the spring sports and a few places weren't paid, but which is totally wrong because they put a lot of time into it. But I haven't heard of much other things. But like I said, if there's anything positive, it'd be even at the at the college level. I just was reading some of the things that they were deciding to do. I hate to eliminate baseball teams and top tennis teams. It just seems like to me over the top. But but with football, one conference, and I can't remember what conference it was. It was a pretty good sized conference. Decided to basically for your home games, you can't put your team. They're going to save expenses for home games. You don't put your team up in the hotel.
Okay.
And I always thought that was weird. You're playing at home, and you got enough money floating around to put 100 of your own players in hotel rooms at home.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing that they spent money on that you look at and say, truth be told, that's not very wise money.
No, Kentucky does it. I assume Louisville does. All the big schools do it. But do you not trust your players that much that you have to put them in hotel rooms at home?
Well, what's also funny about that is the rest of the week they're not in the hotel room. What makes the night before the game any different?
Good question. I don't know. That's a good question. And on road trips, we're going to come back that night. We're not going to stay an extra night, or if we're going to play somewhere, we're just going to get there that day and things like that. I'm going, really? That seems reasonable.
Uh-huh.
And what we've been doing has been, it seemed like to me, a little bit too extravagant.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see why there would be a math professor who would look around and say, you know what, I just don't know that we're spending money wisely here, and have a problem with how the athletics program is run when it comes to that kind of stuff. And I think they would have a fair point. It's not necessarily the math professor's money, but they would still have a fair point.
Yes, yeah, and can we do better than putting people in hotel rooms when they already have dorm rooms at home? Just stuff like that is just I've always just felt. I always felt I'm not just saying it now, but I never understood that. It just seemed like to me just an enormous waste of money.
Real quick, I'm going to mention this. After the Great Depression, we had the Roaring 20s before the Great Depression, right? And it took a long time for the United States to become a kind of, hey, we're just going to spend money on whatever, because we were a very frugal nation. Our grandparents were very frugal, and they didn't like extravagance too much because it was kind of embarrassing. It took us a long time to become that nation again, and maybe this is an opportunity to kind of roll back on all of that, because you have the money, you just blow it on whatever kind of mindset.
Well, spend it wisely, and rather than it's not that it's just oftentimes it's not your money. That's the thing with schools, whether it's college or whatever. It's not. It's either taxpayer money. I guess some of it's private donations. I'm sure that's part of some, but I don't think it's private donations that are paying for hotel rooms.
Yeah, well, and a lot of them have the student fee stuff, and that covers a lot of things, and so there's probably some money that could be rolled back on tuitions and that kind of thing if it wasn't being funded,
like lowering tuition.
Yeah, like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm done spending money on tuition for now, but I totally advocate that notion. All right, John, this is Brown Sports Bag brought to you by McDonald's of Glasgow. We'll be right back.
Presented by McDonald's of Glasgow, it's back to the studio with James and John, the Brown Sports Bag.
Well, John, some interesting things happened over the weekend, such as like actual live sports happened, and we're not talking about the Korean baseball organization either this week. We're talking about horse racing and NASCAR, and I think there was a skins match you talked about. Let's start out with the horse racing. Did you tune in and watch any of that horse racing, John?
I did watch some of it. That's correct. Now the horse racing has not gone completely away. It's they've had it in Florida, and Arkansas, but Kentucky had suspended theirs since the middle of March. So the governor did give the okay. Now it's spectatorless, so there's no spectators there, and everybody, nobody's on site except for the people that have to, run a racetrack. So you got your trainers and your groomsmen and jockeys, and owners can't even go. You can't even go to watch your horse. So there's strict protocols and testing and gloves and masks and so forth. But I think what a lot of people don't realize is oftentimes a racetrack it's their own community. I mean, those horses have to be worked out regardless if there's live racing or not. I mean, you just don't put them in a stall and sit there. I mean, they have to be worked out and so forth. And so there's a huge community of people that rely on that. So, I think it was a good decision. It worked fine in Arkansas and Florida, and since Kentucky has done it, New York and California has also decided to give the go-ahead and so forth, as well as allow.
Horse racing strikes me. You mentioned the how the setup is for it, the ecosystem for the horse racing itself at the track and taking care of the horses and that kind of thing. But it also feels like a sport where you can more clearly control who's there and who can't be there, unlike some other sports. Well,
I've got a friend of mine that is an assistant trainer, and he is at Churchill, and he told me about a lot of the protocols that he had to be tested, and then you get an armband each day you go there, and have to have your temperature check, and he said it is very, very, very strict, to say the least. But he said it's I think they appreciate it that they have a chance to resume their business.
Yeah. Now, what was the gambling situation on those kinds of races? Did they do the virtual gambling, or is it basically? I mean, how is that panning out? Because to me, it seems like outside of the horses themselves, it seems the most important thing about horse racing is betting on it.
Well, that's where the purses are generated and so forth.
Yeah.
Well, obviously you can't go there to bet, but you can. I guess it's online. You can do those. It's like playing, I guess, poker online and so forth. So they do take wagers that way, as far as I know. I don't know what the handles are or anything like that, but I do know they're back in terms of that part.
Yeah. I don't know. We'll talk about NASCAR here in a second, but I was curious how it was for the jockeys and whatnot in the race. I mean, you get done with it, and there's like nobody there to cheer, and I guess
I'm sure it's the same as it's going to be with if baseball gets back and NASCAR and anything else. You're even basketball. I mean, it's going to be about competition. You're just not going to have that factor of being cheered or booed, I guess, to go along with that, or harassed. So but it is competition. It's whether it's a horse racing competition at Churchill or it's the best baseball players or basketball players in the world that are competing with each other. That competitive part, winning and losing, will not change for competitive people.
Well, and that was what I was reading about, like the NASCAR race that was at Darlington on Sunday, that Kevin Harvick won. The racing itself, they didn't feel any different. But I'm sure
that you won't. I don't know how much crowd noise they even hear within a car.
Well, they wouldn't at all. The crowd probably means nothing. It can't mean anything to you when you're on the track. You're doing 180 miles an hour in an oval. I guess you don't have a whole lot of time to look up there and see if your mom's in the stands. But
what a Yeah, I mean, for the competitors, but I don't know how much of a deal it is. Now, from a business perspective, obviously, the gate is taken away from the things, and there's a lot of jobs that will not come back as long as there's no crowds, right? The food vendors and the people that takes up the money and those things, they're not right now being benefited.
Yeah, that's a key part that I think we forget, because so much of the revenue for all of these sports, maybe not horse racing, but definitely for NASCAR and Major League Baseball and basketball and NFL, is driven by TV and not by the people in the stands. It's easy to forget all the people who serve the people in the stands when they're there, though. That's
correct. And those people right now, until there's people that come back, they're still going to be hurting. But, the TV revenue and so forth is still, that's going to be helpful. That's better than nothing.
Yeah. Well, and what I was struck by is, I think it was Kevin Harvick who said when the race was over, everything felt normal until he got out of the car and realized it was like silence, basically. And that's when it kind of hit him that nobody watched this race. Nobody was here. And
nobody watched it live.
Yeah.
But what they have to remember is there are millions of people that are watching you on TV.
Well, but I think
so there is an audience.
There is, but I think, you've played sports. There's nothing quite like the feeling that you get when something happens and there's a cheer, in the stands and that kind of stuff. And I think maybe, you don't, that emptiness doesn't exist as long as he's in this car racing. As soon as he gets out, that's when it hits him. Oh my gosh!
I agree. That instant gratification of a cheer or harassment harassment, whether it's a boo or somebody yelling at you, is a factor. But also, there's also another motivation, is that knowing that TV camera is on you too.
Yeah.
That's I think that's real as well. Now if there was no spectators and no TV cameras and then it's just you guys, and that turns more into just like recreational, playing at the park.
Yeah, that's if it's racing, that's the old days of the bootleggers just trying to see whose car was fastest.
Right. So the ratings were high. I mean, the ratings for the NASCAR was extremely high. For the horse racing has been high, and I think they set a record in terms of the MMA fighting as well.
Yeah, I think that was that race at Darlington was the highest viewership outside of the Daytona race. I don't know if it was ever for a race, but it was highest since 2017.
Yeah, which should, if they can do it safely, should make. I mean, golf and tennis is making an excuse. They've canceled all the way through August. They're making an excuse. It's an international sport, so therefore it makes it more tricky. But
that's probably right. I mean, the travel on that particular for tennis is a little bit different than it is for other sports, I would say.
It may be, but there's enough American tennis players that you could play. You could have an event in Florida. A lot of international golfers live in the United States.
Yeah.
Why golf doesn't play, I have no clue.
Well, and I actually think golf and tennis are different, because a lot of tennis players do not live in the United States, especially
they do not.
Upper echelon.
They do not.
Now, you could put together a tournament of American tennis players, and I'm sure we'd turn on and watch some of it, but it wouldn't last very long.
That's exactly right. But, if you play a tennis tournament, and have 64 people, you can have 64 tests. That's not that hard anymore.
Yeah. Well, back to this NASCAR thing, the interesting thing that they're doing is they're running 2 races consecutively at a track.
Yeah, they're going Wednesday this week, too, I believe. They're going...
Yeah, that'll be at Darlington at 7 p.m., and then Sunday they're going to race at Charlotte, and then the following Wednesday they'll race at Charlotte again.
Yeah, they're bound and determined. They want their full schedule in. So I don't know a lot about NASCAR. My friend Warren Cunningham is a big fan. We should have got him on. He knows a lot more about it than I do. But it seems like it went well. It's like anything else. 99% of the people do not, are not going to have an opportunity anyway to go to a NASCAR event. So it's watching on TV is the natural thing for most people.
Right.
Unless you live in Darlington or close by,
Yeah. My first dream in life was to be a NASCAR racer. So that was my first dream. I wanted to drive. I wanted to make left turns for all of my life.
I think in certain southern states and in certain areas in another month or two, I think they're going to start allowing spectators at some of these events. That a lot of these stadiums for NASCAR and football stadiums can hold up to 100,000 people.
Yeah.
I can see it if things continue to progress in certain areas. I can see them allowing a third of that capacity. You can spread out a lot of people that way.
I'm about to give away a thing that that NASCAR should do right now. They should mass produce face masks with all the different car numbers on them so that they can hand them out or sell them, whichever way they want to do it, at the gate. If you want people to wear masks at your event, I think if you put, somebody's number on there like Kevin Harvick and on the front of it, then that'll get it done. Yeah,
and you can't make people wear masks, but you can, as a condition of coming in for a ticket, say, listen, here, you can come, but here's the condition. Here's the price. You got to wear a mask. I think a lot of people will do it.
I think that's a brilliant idea, too, for a sport like NASCAR. I think they would be one that would maybe change some of the discussion around this going on in the country.
Yeah, and I think you can do that. I think you can do it at a baseball game, You still have to. You can't have it for a while, but you have to maintain the distancing things like that, and just say, "Listen, we'd love for you to come, but you got to wear a mask. If you don't want to wear a mask, then watch it on TV."
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. One last thing about the return of sports, and we're going to go into this here in this next segment, and the final segment of the show. We're going to talk about the guidelines for Major League Baseball's return. And then we're going to talk about the fact that the NBA may return before Major League Baseball for some very interesting reasons. So this is Brown Sports Bag, brought to you by McDonald's of Glasgow. We'll be right back.
Presented by McDonald's of Glasgow, it's back to the studio with James and John, the Brown Sports Bag.
Well, John, as we mentioned last week, Major League Baseball owners have sent a proposal to the Players Union, Major League Baseball Players Union, for some guidelines and some requirements for the return of the sport. And I thought some of these things were really quite amusing. Some of them are serious, and I guess they're all serious to some degree, but some of them are just kind of amusing too. And the one that really kind of struck me, and you can tell us some of these as well, the one that really kind of struck me was they would encourage the players not to fight. And I thought, what happens when that pitcher throws 2 or 3 brushback pitches and the batter decides he's had enough? What is he supposed to do at that particular point in time? I'm sure there are people who don't like to see fighting in baseball, and I'm not necessarily advocating fighting, but sometimes...
Shouldn't that be the general rule, even without the coronavirus, no fighting?
Yeah, it seems to be an idea that they should... look, if they can encourage it in hockey, surely they can encourage it in baseball and get away with them not fighting, right?
Yeah, well, among that is no arguing with the umpires. I'm sure that will be popular with the umpires.
Yeah, they want to know if we can't have COVID every year, at least COVID rules every year, just in case.
But the more radical ones, other than the ones we just mentioned, is no spitting. Now, that may be a game changer right there. That you can't spit is. I don't know if they can play, to be honest with you.
Yeah, all the ones that have to spit all the time, and that's a bunch of them. Whether it is a tobacco product or it is sunflower seeds, those guys. It seems to be just a baseball requirement. I believe that's what they said in Bull Durham, right? It was a baseball requirement to spit.
Yeah, I was taught how to spit growing up, so I thought that it's going to be hard to overcome. Yeah, but it's incredible the detail they came up with. They clearly are trying to make it as as medically sound as they can come up with. And some of them, those are some of the kind of the funny ones, but some practical ones. If there's not going to be anybody in the stands, they're going to use the stands for basically the bench.
Yeah.
If you're not playing, you'll be sitting in the stands away from each other, things like that. That makes somewhat sense, and things like that. Players may not touch their face to give signs. You know, that's interesting.
They can only use trash cans.
Yeah, not allowed to lick their fingers, like pitchers. The pitchers bring their own rosin bag up there and so forth. So it is pretty detailed, to say the least. Managers and coaches must wear masks while in the dugouts.
Mm-hmm.
Now, things that I think are a little bit over the top are things like when you hold somebody on in baseball, first, when there's a runner on first, they don't want the first baseman just to stay on the bag. They want them to get out of there, and try to keep that distance. That may be a little difficult to do.
Yeah.
They don't want players on road trips. Restaurants are off limits on the road, including the ones in hotels, as our hotel fitness centers and so forth.
Well, I think what's interesting is they're not really talking about, on the scheduling side, they're not really talking about kind of isolating the players away to some state like Arizona or Florida. And
no,
keeping them
they're not. They are. They're planning on playing in all the cities in which they can. The California and New York may be a little difficult, though I did see today that those governors are basically saying that we hope quickly that sports can return to their states, but if not, I think baseball is willing to move those to perhaps Arizona and Florida, in the meantime.
Yeah, I think Gavin Newsom in California, the governor of California, said it is possible if all the guidelines are met that they could allow athletes to return, professional athletes, I suppose, to return to their facilities June 1 or the first week of June, I think is what he said. I don't think he said the date. So, yeah. I mean, that does change the dynamic there versus what we were looking at last week or 2 weeks ago.
That is correct. So, it's awful detailed, and I'm sure over time, if they finally agree to the money and agree to that this will be adapted a little bit, and maybe as once they get started, as the weeks go by, and if things continue to improve, then maybe some of the things could also be changed according to the circumstances. But I'm glad they're discussing it, and I'm hoping it's not the money that's going to cause them not to play. I hope it's I hope they can eventually come to an agreement.
Well, and that's the thing about Major League Baseball that is kind of interesting, is that the Players Union is very strong in Major League Baseball, stronger than the unions for like NFL and NBA, just generally speaking. But I also think to some degree part of the problem is that the relationship between players and owners in Major League Baseball is just not very good.
It's generally awful.
And I just don't understand. I don't know if it's because, I don't know what the history is necessarily on the labor issues, but I do know that, it seems like there have been more labor issues in baseball than any other professional sport.
Yes, there's no question about it. It seems like they had more strikes, more labor issues, more everything in baseball. And, they had free agency probably before any other sport. So, the players have won a lot of these things. There's no salary cap in baseball.
Yeah.
So, you can go out and make as much as you want to. There's no limit and so forth. But it is, to say it is the owners and players, there not only does it seem to be a distrust, but there's a historical issue between players and owners. It's now there's more players in baseball, when you add all I was going to say it, maybe more players in football, but
yeah,
it just seems like to me there's just the union has got an enormous more power in baseball than the other two sports. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
I kind of wonder if it's not the case in baseball these days that there are not individual players so popular or with such popularity and power that they can kind of drive the conversation as there is in the NFL and in the NBA.
Well, there's not. The NBA is all player-driven. It's, one player changes the entire franchise. They're the stars of that league. And in football, it's quarterbacks, right? It's not really an offensive lineman, but it's quarterbacks.
Right.
Baseball didn't have that, and they really don't. And there's not that, they don't really have stars all that much, to be perfectly honest with you, and that's why this is could have been or could still be a really good time for them to maybe get back into showcase some of their players. You know, when viewership, people are starving for sports. You know, this is where it could be a good time for baseball if they can do it safely. You know, that's I think they can, but you know, I'm not begrudging anybody for not if it's a safety deal. But if they can and they can guarantee and if they can do it safely, I just think they're missing a golden opportunity.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you. I mean, we're just going to have to see how that pans out for them. And we're going to talk about the contrast between the baseball players union, and the owners here in this next segment with the NBA. This is the Brown Sports Bag brought to you by McDonald's of Glasgow. We'll be right back.
Presented by McDonald's of Glasgow, it's back to the studio with James and John, the Brown Sports Bag.
Well, John, last week whenever we first were talking about the owner's proposal in Major League Baseball, one of the things that had happened in the NBA is it seemed like it had kind of gone dormant, that, you know, initially there were some ideas that they could take the teams and put them in bubbles and then play like the playoffs or finish off the season however they're going to do it. But then it seemed dead in the water. But later in the week, a group of star players got together on their own and discussed, you know, what it is they want to do, whether or not they want to try to finish the season. And I think they basically came to the agreement that they do want to try to finish the season, that they don't want to miss this time. And I got the impression for them it was not about they didn't want to lose money. I think the players have a desire to not miss an opportunity to win a championship, especially the ones that were involved in that conversation. And it just feels like sometimes NBA players are just different than players in other sports. And maybe it's because they are so recognizable.
Yeah, I think it's both. I think it's partly some of them have an opportunity to win a championship, and they don't want to throw it away like LeBron.
Yeah.
And I also do think it's money. One of the things that the NBA does is they have a relatively good relationship with their players, and I think they trust their commissioner, Adam Silver.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of what happened was Adam Silver basically laid it out to them what life would be like without the rest of the season, and they were looking at several $1 billion worth of revenue that is lost.
Right.
And in a league in which they have, the players, I think, gets 50 or 51% of the revenue, that is a big hit. And I think the other thing that Adam Silver pressed upon them is there's no guarantee right now that, you know, if you cancel right now, we'll just start a new season in October. You know, we don't really know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that fact of the amount of money that could be lost, with the fact that LeBron wants to play, and some of your stars definitely want to get back because if they're on the teams that have a chance to win, and LeBron's in his 17th year, he's not going to get very many more chances. I think when you push their stars wanting to play and the cold hard fact of the revenue that could be lost, I think they've come to agreement. We're going to try to play.
Well, and you mentioned that relationship between the owners and the players, that it's more healthy than it is in most of the other sports. And I think one of the things is the players and the owners are probably willing to take the same risks, but also follow the same guidelines, it would seem, in terms of, you know, these are the things we're going to have to do to play. I feel like the players are like, okay, we can do this for a couple of months if we have to, or however long it is.
Right. And I will say, I think it's going to be. I do think they're in a tougher spot. Not that it's a contact sport. It's not necessarily I'm worried about the virus for them.
Uh-huh.
I just think it's tough after playing 2/3 of your season and then just stopping for three and a half months and then restarting again. That's almost like starting a whole new season over, and I think that's really difficult.
Yeah, because, I mean, basically you're going to be playing in a window that is basically the summer league season window, and your veteran players do not play summer league. You know, they take that time to heal their bodies and get whatever surgeries they need and that kind of thing. And I think the secondary part of this is and I've seen this, that the discussion is if they do this, they're going to back up the next season till Christmas. They're not even going to start basically in October, November. They're going to wait and still have their basic 2-month window of no activity.
Yeah, which they probably should start around Christmas every year anyway, to be honest with you. But yeah, it's so. I just think I think baseball and football are in a better situation in the sense their season never has started.
Right. Yeah,
basketball is a different situation.
They can make plans for a season. Baseball not as much, but definitely the NFL. They can make plans for next season right now, knowing what they're going to be facing. And
watch what everybody else does.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and it's the canary in the coal mine thing, as we discussed. When it came to watching the Korean baseball organization, that's kind of the canary in the coal mine where everybody can look and see, okay, how's this working out? And then we have an organization that does here in the States, and everybody can look at it and say, what lessons did they learn? What protocols do we need to have that they didn't? What do we not need that they did do? I mean, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and that's the benefit. And football has, and they had maintained, they did the draft, but that's not, that's a great thing, but you're not putting anybody in risk doing the draft. So they've done the draft and free agency, but they hadn't had to put anybody out on the field yet. So they have the opportunity to kind of watch, to assess, and so forth. But I do think they're going to play.
I want to circle around real quick to something you brought up earlier in the show related to the cost of college athletics and that kind of thing. You were telling me off air, I believe it was maybe Murray State's president was talking about the money related to football, that they're not necessarily, some of these programs, some of these schools are not in dire straits if they don't have a football season because of other factors related to that. Can you kind of tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it's the Murray level, and I get all the numbers confused. It's Division I, but I don't know what series that Murray and them are in.
Yeah.
In terms of football, but yeah, the article that I read is a lot of the schools at that level are not overly concerned if they lose football or not, because for the most part they don't make any money off of it. They kind of lose money. Mm-hmm. The only thing they would lose is some of the guaranteed money to go play the big boys. They'd lose that, but they would regain it by not having the travel costs and all that other stuff. And basically what they're saying is for football, for a vast majority of them, even though they don't make any money, it's a culture thing for a university, it's a recruitment thing, it's a status thing, but it's not a money-generating thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of, we've talked about this before on this show, is that the importance of athletics, especially the bigger, like football, men's basketball, that kind of thing, the importance to a university very often is not financial in the athletic program. It's financial in terms of enrollment of students and being on the map so that somebody sees you on TV and thinks, hey, I might go there. It's not some of the other things that we think it is. And I think for some of these schools, like we were talking about with Furman, Furman also announced today they dropped their baseball program. I'm kind of curious as to why they are making these decisions at this moment. I mean, I feel like the reasons they are making these decisions at this moment is that they've made poor decisions before this moment.
Yeah, I'm just worried, and I've said this before, that this situation could be giving schools excuses to do things that maybe they otherwise wanted to do a long time ago.
Yeah, exactly, like cutting programs and that kind of thing, and that's. They're just disguising it in this, because really that means you might need to look back over the last few years of how they've run their athletic budgets and ask, have they been managing it responsibly?
That's correct. I mean, baseball is. There's a lot of kids in baseball. What doesn't make sense to me? It doesn't generate a lot of money, but they only for Division I. It's 11 scholarships for 30 kids. That means there's a lot of people that are probably paying to come to pay your school just to play.
Yeah, you're probably losing some money by cutting the baseball program in its own right.
Yep.
Well, I mean, I think all that's kind of fascinating, but I thought it was fascinating talking about the fact that if some universities may lose a football season, it's not really the financial hit that we would think it is now. I imagine if an Alabama, LSU, Ohio State,
different.
Clemson,
totally different.
Yeah, that is a big deal, because in that case, we're talking about losing that TV revenue.
That's correct.
And that would be a huge hit for the athletic program. Real quick, before we get off here today, we got about 2 minutes left. I want to tell everybody this will be our last show until June 30th. I think that'll be the next show we do. I am taking a month-long sabbatical to go and do some other things for a while, but we will be back on June 30th. And when we come back, we'll have a lot more answers on things that are going on. And hopefully what we'll be able to do when we come back then is talk about upcoming football season, upcoming golf, soccer, those kinds of things. And we will start working on doing our previews for the coming season. So I just want everybody to know, if you may not hear us over the next month here on air, but you can always go online to 104thescore.com and listen to past episodes, past shows. There are lots of them on there. Also, I want to take a moment to thank a lot of the people who have listened to this show. John, do you realize we've been doing this show for almost 4 years?
It's amazing. I want to thank McDonald's, too. They've been our key sponsor the whole time as well.
Yeah. I mean, I know that we have Steve Riley, the state representative. I know he downloads the show and listens to it.
Yeah.
And several
Great
other
guy.
people. Yep. Several other people in the area, when they don't get to hear it live, they go on there and they download it. You can download the show. I mentioned 104thescore.com. You can find it there. If you are an Apple phone user, you can go on your little podcast app and search Brown Sports Bag, and you can find it there. So no excuses. You can still listen to us. We just won't have anything live for about a month.
Well, maybe we can talk about high school sports when we come back.
That would be terrific.
That was the original purpose of the show.
Yeah, I mean, we've been live and local, so to speak, for almost 4 years, and the last 2 months have been a little bit of a struggle in terms of talking about that kind of thing.
Well, I wish you the best, James, in your month of endeavors. Stay healthy, and look forward to getting back with everybody in the studio in
Yes,
June.
sir. Thank you, John, and you have a fun month as well. This is Brown Sports Bag, brought to you by McDonald's of Glasgow. We'll be back June 30th.
Thanks for listening, and be sure and join James and John once again next Monday at 4 for the Brown Sports Bag, a local weekly sports machine presented by McDonald's of Glasgow.
Coming soon to your FM dial, this is Fox Sports Radio, WCDS Glasgow, AM 1230.